Hey folks, welcome back to Only the Best Fantasy Novels. My name is Robin, and today we continue the absolute insanity of the project I've set myself of listing my top 100 fantasy series. As usual, the links for the previous videos are in the description, and let's get right into it. At number 60, I have Peter V. Brett's Demon Cycle and his Nightfall Saga, the sequel series. So the concept of this series is pretty simple. When night falls, the Corelings rise, which are these elemental demons that have essentially hunted humanity to the brink of extinction, leaving them trapped in these basically settlements that are guarded by failing wards. But then the wards of power that allow humans to fight back against the demons are rediscovered, and that triggers a war to pretty much determine the future of the world. So that's it. That's a basic concept behind this series, and it explodes into so much more from there. Like it's an absolutely unhinged epic fantasy series that has just these incredible character moments and journeys that we go through, and it's every bit as dark as it is heroic. Like everyone in here, there's no goody two shoes. Everyone toes the line in some way, shape, and form, I would say. And all that being said, like, it's a series that I enjoyed quite a bit of, and it's also a series where it really came close to losing me quite a few times. Like Peter V. Brett doesn't hesitate to go in some very brave directions with his stories, and the effectiveness of those choices I leave up to you to decide as a reader. For some people it works spectacularly, for some others not so much. For me it was a bit here and there, which is why it clocks in at number 60, by the way. All that being said, there are moments that, like I said, make this series really stand out among the masses, and it's why it's on this list to begin with. The sequel series, the Nightfall Saga, does a good job of continuing the story whilst also resetting it. We follow a new generation in it, and like I said, it resets the story in a really cool way. It allows it to strip the baggage that came with the initial 5 books, and it takes the series in some pretty brave directions. All that being said, there are still some flaws that manage to scribble their way into the sequels, so take with that what you will. But as far as series goes, if it strikes a chord with you, you're in for a pretty wild ride. So that's number 60, Peter V. Brett's Demon Cycle and the subsequent Nightfall Saga series. At number 59, I have Ben Aronovich's Rivers of London series. And this is, think your standard urban fantasy, detective, mystery, action-adventure kind of story. But this is where this gets a pretty great twist. Number one, it's British. The author's British, and it's written with with the kind of vibe I can only describe as that stodgy British feel to it, which might be because the main character, he is a police officer. And this series does something that no other urban fantasy series I've read does, in that the main character is not a vigilante. He's an officer of the law. He acts within the confines of the law. There are moments where the law fails, and he may be forced to come up with some creative measures around it, or he just straight up can't do things. And it's such a cool concept. It's effectively a police procedural in an urban fantasy setting. And when I say police procedural, we do really get into the thick of it. Like, Ben Aronovich did quite a bit of research into this, I would assume, given just the terminology and the laws that he can, and the procedures and these kind of things that he deploys or he depicts over the course of this series. It's just really entertaining from that aspect of it. And in addition to that, like, it has that kind of stodgy, gentlemanly British kind of feel to it, which is also, I guess, also an effect of the basic premise of the series, where we follow Peter Grant, who is an apprentice magician attached to the Folly, which is the unit of the Metropolitan Police, the London Metropolitan Police, that deals with the that deals with the supernatural and the uncanny. And much like these series tend to be, he deals with a series of adventures with supernatural twists and turns with an overall arc. All that being said, this series is a bit unusual in that it introduces like there are multiple novels that introduce multiple characters, and these characters do begin to play parts in the story as a whole, as effectively as Peter's counterparts in different jurisdictions, and by after wrapping up the main arc, we enter this series of a few books that are almost effectively standalone. And now with the most recent book, he begins to develop what seems to be a whole new arc. And whilst at the same time giving us another twist on the urban fantasy genre with the choice of how he seems to be proceeding with the main characters. It's really well done. It's a really entertaining series. It's not going to be for everyone because it's not what you think of when you think of these type of urban fantasy series. But if you're a fan of those like police procedural cop shows, those kind of things, I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this one. It's great. It's entertaining. It's as fun and action packed as these stories can be. But it's just really great. Well, I was having a blast with it at least. So that's my number 59 pick, Ben Aranovich's Rivers of London. At number 58, I have Rebecca Roanhorse's Between Earth and Sky trilogy. And this is an epic fantasy trilogy inspired by the pre-colonial Americas. So think of like Mayas, Incas, that kind of that kind of Spanish, Latin American kind of mythology and culture and that kind of thing. And the series follows the rise of the avatar of the Crow God and the seismic shift he has on the politics of the world as he essentially as he comes into his own as the embodiment of this god on earth. So to say that this series is spectacular and entertaining is putting it mildly. Like, as far as these books go, it's a trilogy. The books are fairly short. But what's really cool is that Rebecca Roanhorse is a really talented writer, and she has this skill to just go after these big ideas and big concepts and bake them into a story in such a way that it's not heavy-handed. You could almost blink and miss it. Like it's just part of the fabric of the story, and you have to read carefully and read and really think about what you're reading to really grasp some of the things that she just kind of includes there as almost as part of the world building. And like this is a series where it is going to challenge. It's very different from what you think of when you think of traditional epic fantasy, like what we would commonly get with the whole pseudo-European thing. It's very different in that regard regarding how the character arcs and these kind of things. But the other really cool thing I enjoyed about it is that it's not often that I can say I read a story where the magic in it is not just like epic in terms of what it can do, but it's also beautiful to envision. And that's the case here. Like some of the acts of magic that happen in here, like when I picture them in my mind, they're some of the most breathtaking like scenes I could possibly imagine. Like I would love to see somebody do maybe the Broken Mind and do some special editions of these and give us some truly incredible artwork, because this series is just jam-packed with set pieces that can pull that off. So it's really great. And in terms of the character arts, it's a series that just delves into a whole lot of really heavy topics. It has the complex interplay of politics that we can expect from a setup like that, religious upheaval. It has culture clashes and these kind of things. Really incredible series. I highly recommend you check it out. That's my number 58 pick, Rebecca Roanhorse's Between Earth and Sky trilogy. At number 57, I have a classic of the genre, and that's Robert E. Howard's Conan. Now, if you're familiar with Conan in his Hollywood Arnold Schwarzenegger shtick, you'd be very surprised what you find when you read these stories. Far from being like that muscle-bound brain-dead warrior that Hollywood depicts, Conan is actually almost like this sly adventurer this sly adventure thief who goes on these missions of just daring and intrigue and these kind of things. He does absolutely have some story arcs that mimic some of what you see in the movies, but for the most part, he's much more intelligent than he's given credit for, is the only way to put it. And he just goes on these really fun quests and on these really incredible adventures, really and truly. And Like, it's a series of short stories. It's a classic of the genre for a reason. Are they a bit dated? Some of them might be. Most of them, for me, weren't. They're, if anything, there were quite a few stories that I would consider quite a bit ahead of their time. And then there's just so much here. Like, when you read this, like, it really gives you an idea of where the genre came from, where it comes to the whole Sword and Sorcery thing. It was a really entertaining and eye-opening kind of read, and one I highly recommend for fans of the genre to check out. Number 57, Robert E. Howard's Conan. To keep the ball going, at number 56, I have the Glenn Cook series that no one ever talks about, and that's the Chronicles of the Dread Empire. So this series features some of the most absolutely metal titles in all of fantasy. Like, just look up the list of those book names and you'll know what I'm talking about. Like, this is Glenn Cook's take on epic fantasy, the way that he had a look at military fiction with the Black Company, and in this one he gave us this motley crew cast of like rogues, magicians, kings, and these kind of things as they deal with the expansionist agenda of the Dread Empire, which is this Eastern force. Like, you can tell, it's very much a story inspired by its times, right? Like, if you're a fan of the Black Company and Malazan, there's no way you're not going to enjoy this series. Malazan in particular, like, Steven Erikson he was so heavily inspired by this series that the line for plagiarism gets very, very blurry. When you read this series, you are absolutely going to recognize some Malazan characters in here. You're absolutely going to recognize pretty much the entire setup for Deadhouse Gates. It's calling it inspired as being very, very kind. So yeah, there's that. All that being said, the series itself is told in a very interesting way. Events are not told in a linear fashion, like books take place in different times, and you kind of have to piece together where they fall in the timeline. There are other books that tell almost exactly the same sequence of events from a different POV with just a little bit added on towards the end. And then we have the tragedy of the finale. So, when Glenn Cook was writing the 8th book, which was supposed to be number 8 of 14 books for the series, someone stole the manuscript from his home, and it kind of broke his motivation to continue the series. And as a result of that, 24 years passed, with the 7th book being the final book in this series, until I think when he got the republishing deal from Nightshade for the most recent editions, they were able to incentivize him to write a final book to wrap up the series. So what we get in the 8th book is a book that wraps up the series. It closes off like the majority of the major threads that the series opens. So we do get the ending. We do get closure of some kind, but it's an ending that's not truly effective because it's forced to do so much in so little page count. It's not the ending that was originally intended, but it is an ending of sorts. So it's a book that it may not work for you, but it's one that we should be very grateful we even got, because there's quite a few, like, fantasy is infamous at this point for having a number of series that just aren't completed. So the fact that this book even exists is something that I personally am very grateful for. So yeah, overall a spectacular series. If you're a fan of Glenn Cook, Malazan, absolutely worth checking out. Number 56, Glenn Cook's Chronicles of the Dread Empire. At number 55, I have a surprising entry for both you and me, and that is Christopher Paolini's Inheritance Cycle. So, here's the thing. When you don't grow up in a North American society, right? Like, you weren't raised knowing about Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or these kind of things. Like, you never had exposure to Anne McCaffrey's porn. When you're just a kid and someone drops a book in your lap about people riding dragons and battling each other, you're going to think that that's some pretty insane stuff. And that's exactly what happened with me. Like, before I was exposed to any of that stuff, I read Aragon and I had a blast with it. And the same goes for the sequels. All that being said, like, this series is absolutely one of those series I credit with me just having such a deep love of fantasy. And all that being said, yes, it's quite clear there are some really huge flaws with the series. The more time passes, the more lust it loses. But also, it's a series I still think back on very fondly. because of just the memories I have of it, the feelings it inspired in me at the time that clearly had a lifelong impact, and just the bonds it allowed me to form with friends, just spending hours talking about these books and these kind of things. So, a deeply flawed series, but one that, given the impact it had on me and just my enjoyment, it deserves no less a spot on here. It's there, it's present, deal with it. You can go on to the next entry on the list. So that was number 55, Christopher Paolini's Inheritance Cycle. At number 54, I have actually another middle grade entry. And this is Joseph Delaney's Apprentice, Last Apprentice, or Wardstone Chronicles. It was published under different names in the US and UK. I hate when they do that. But anyway, this series is essentially... maybe it's a series that probably shouldn't be this high, but once again, when I think about series, like, it's one of those series that I consider very formative to me being a fantasy reader. And we follow Thomas Ward, who is the seventh son of a seventh son, which qualifies him to apprentice to the local spook, who you could think of as basically like a monster hunter. He deals with the he's one of the people who comprises humanity's defense against things that go bump in the night. And over the course of these novels, like Thomas and his master, they go up against a wide range of European of creatures inspired by human myths and legends, by European myths and legends, I should say. So all that being said, like, this is a series that really does a good job of blending fantasy and horror. I think it actually skews more to the horror side, and it's also a series that is kind of on the verge between middle grade and YA. So there's not like the typical YA tropes that you think of, but it's definitely not the kind of series you would give to kids who are very firmly in the younger side of the middle grade range. Like, it can get pretty intense. All that said, like, these books are packed with some pretty insane moments, and you can argue that it kind of lived past its sell-by date, because there's 13 books in here, and some of them just aren't as good as the others. But all that being said, some of the later books in the series were also some of the most insane of the series. So whether it lived past its sell-by date or not, that's up for you to decide. All in all, like I said, it's a series that was very formative to me as a fantasy reader. One I still think of tremendous, that I still enjoy tremendously. Like, some of when I think of some of the most insane moments I've ever read in a fantasy book, some of them are still in this series to date. So do with that what you will. But that's my number 54 pick, Joseph Delaney's Last Apprentice slash Wardstone Chronicles series. At number 53, I have a series that, when I read it, it was just a book that seemed to be inspired by the fairy realm. Since then, it's been rebranded as Romantasy, so do with that what you will. But it's Rebecca Ross's Elements of Cadence. And this follows the setup of this story is that we have young children who are disappearing from this island, and the spirits of the island are riled up. And traditionally, when this problem has occurred, the way that it's handled is for a bard to come and interact with the spirits and figure out what needs to be done to bring things back to the way they've always been. The problem is that the only bard the island can call on is a man who fled the island and has been away for the last 10 years. So he returns to the island, and he becomes embroiled in this whole mystery with the missing children and what has the spirits riled up and all of that. And in addition to that, this is a deeply segregated island. It's separated between these clans, and there is a clan war brewing. So time is of the essence to resolve all of this. So there's quite a lot going on with this story. It's I feel like it's almost inspired by maybe Scottish, Irish, Welsh. There's definitely some sort of European inspiration with this kind of setup and story. More knowledgeable folks will absolutely get the idea of what I'm talking about, and you can drop a comment and feel free to enlighten me on it. But I can tell there's something here. I'm almost sure, like, just the way it's set up, you can tell there's some sort of historical context for the way that this book, like the structure behind the conflict of this story. But the cool thing about this book, this duology, because it is a duology of books, is that as the story unfolds, we just get this really incredible mystery and human character drama. So, like, so much human character drama that's just interlaced with this incredible depiction of fairy and magic that has basically been unleashed in all the wrong ways. And in addition to that, as if all that wasn't bad enough, there's this clan war that's brewing. There's mystery surrounding some of the characters. There's the mystery of the bard. Why did he leave the island for 10 years? And all of that. The reason why this book was branded romance, like the series was rebranded to kind of take advantage of the whole romanticy thing, by the way, is because there is a romantic subplot that becomes a pretty big component, but is not. It never becomes the main focus of the story. It is a large part of the story, but never the main focus of the story when you compare these other things going on. So do with that what you will. For me, a highly entertaining duology, and I'll be more than excited to pick up something else that Rebecca Ross writes that draws my attention the way this did. And I mean, look at that gorgeous cover art. I'm not going to lie, that cover art is the reason why I even looked at this book in the first place. And I really enjoyed the duology as a result. So that's why it's at number 53. Rebecca Ross's Elements of Cadence. At number 52, I have the most creative trilogy I've read from this author to date, and that's Mark Lawrence's Library trilogy. And this is a trilogy that is focused on the conflict surrounding a library, like a magical library that touches all societies, all cultures, wherever people in whatever shape or form have begun to develop stories, a culture, tell tales, in whatever form, the library exists in some way and touches in their world. And we follow the story of the conflict for this library and also the two particular characters and the relationship they develop as they interact with each other and through the library. And like I said, this is a very creative, like Mark Lawrence's most creative trilogy to date. Just some of the themes and the ideas and the concepts that he explores in here. And then we have it's just incredible to think about. Very, very thought-provoking, especially in this age where we have things like the internet and AI that are very much coming to play huge parts of our lives. Then we have the actual story itself and just some of the world-building elements. Like there's I don't want to spoil it for you, but this is a series that blends fantasy, it blends historical fiction, it blends science fiction, it blends historical fantasy, alternate history, you name it. Like, so many things happen in here. And it's also a series that isn't, as much as this setup might sound very different from everything Mark Lawrence has written to date, it's also not a series that shirks away from some of the darker themes that he tends to kind of bake into his stories. Like there's cannibalism, there's racism, there's all sorts of isms in here to keep the people who need that little bit of crunch to their stories in there. And it's just a really great series. The third book recently came out, and the way it ends in such a interesting manner that I think this series is going to be very, very divisive. Like, as much as it was divisive before, it's going to be even more so with that ending. And it's a trilogy I appreciated tremendously, and one that the more time passes, the more I just find myself thinking on it. And yeah, that's my number 52 pick, Mark Lawrence's Library trilogy. At number 51, I have Jeff Vandermeer's Area X, and this is a series that made Jeff Vandermeer the weird fiction guy. Not just within fantasy, but it seems just within fiction in general. And the more I think on this quartet of books, like the more I'm just awestruck by what he achieved here. Like this is a quartet of books that surrounds the Area X, which is this ecological almost disaster site that exists, and the 4 books tell the story of the world before Area X came into being, what happened, what was the human response, and just some of the weird and strange things that occur within Area X. And no of the 4 books, none follow the same characters. They're all told in different ways, different styles. Some may work for you, some may aggravate you. They all have different agendas. They all have different plot lines and themes and ideas that they explore. And they all touch on Area X and investigate it in some strange way. And this series, over the course of these 4 books, it blends fantasy, science fiction, horror, it even touches on some of the other genres. Like there's moments in here you can really only describe as espionage, thriller, and these kind of things. It's a really incredible series, and your mileage is going to vary with it, to put it mildly. Like there's some people who are going to absolutely love what Jeff Vandermeer does here. There's some people who are just not going to work for it at all. Like I've now read the series twice. I read it the second time in preparation for the most recent book, which came out around the 10th anniversary of the first three, and it's just a series that just grows in my mind more and more the more I think about it. More like just the sickening twists and some of the absolutely strange and inexplicable things that happen in here. Like Jeff Vandermeer doesn't hold your hand. He doesn't sugarcoat you. He doesn't spoon feed you anything. He gives you, he infers things. He doesn't even bother to explain others. And if you're a fan of closure and needing to understand every single component and aspect of a story, you are going to be tremendously disappointed by this one. But it does leave it open to interpretation and for you to kind of decide how you think things played out within a certain confine. And what was the explanation and these kind of things. Like very inexplicable things happen, and it's up to you to kind of formulate your own ideas and concepts, which is just really cool. So a series I enjoyed tremendously. Number 51, Jeff Vandermeer's Area X. And that's it. That's my list of picks, number 60 to 51. I guess that's pretty much it. If you've made it this far into the video, drop a comment, let me know what you think of these, which you've read, which you've liked, which you hate, whatever. I'm here to chat about them. And yeah, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.